Mike, the homelessness review published on the Thurrock Council website. If you were marking that as a school teacher, I get the impression you would give that a C or a D. Is that true?
Well, the voluntary sector came together to look at the review, and we weren't particularly happy about a lot of the content of it, because it doesn't appear to be well researched. It doesn't appear to take in many of the concerns of local groups, especially people dealing with vulnerable residents in the area. So our response runs to 14 pages, picking up various items in the review, and we feel that it's a flawed document, really. We feel there's a lot more that needs to be said in it. For instance, you know, many of the voluntary sector groups, health professionals, housing association professionals took time off to go to these workshops that were put on by the homelessness department to ascertain our views on how homelessness functions in the borough. Now, we went along and we gave you know, our views, and when you see the review, they're in an appendix at the back of the review. So, you know, we don't feel that that's really engagement, that our views have been taken on board. Otherwise, one would assume that it would go into the draft, into the body of the draft, instead of being stuck at the end as an appendix.
So you feel that, or the voluntary organisation feel very much on the outside looking in, so to speak, when it comes to these issues and how these issues are going to be carried forward?
We do. I mean, we're particularly concerned for residents in that one of the strands of the report appears to be that they want to have one point of access, which we assume will be through going into the civic offices. Well, many people are reluctant, you know, especially when they're vulnerable or in that situation, of going to the local authority. There is a case to be made that you need to have points of access referring in, whether they be through the voluntary sector or through housing offices, etc. But to focus it in one point, bearing in mind the area covered in Thurrock and the diversity of the communities across Thurrock, you feel that partnership working would be a better way forward. Particularly, you know, people might watch this and think, well, homelessness is about people who sleep in cardboard boxes under bridges, you know, rough sleepers, street homeless, but that's not really what this is about. This is about people who find themselves in a very, very difficult situation, more and more so in the current climate, where they might have been repossessed, might be a young person leaving care, it might be someone fleeing violence. Where do they go and who do they turn to? And if you have to, with that background, go into the middle of a foyer, in the middle of a public building, and say to someone in there, you know, I was beaten up by my partner last night, can I have a ticket to see someone from housing? We don't think that is necessarily the way forward for people.
So without sounding too glib, do you feel that the council aren't thinking outside the cardboard box?
I think, yes, generally the tone of the review. I mean, obviously a review is looking at what's gone on in the past, and you know, we've worked with the council very closely over the years as a bureau, and most voluntary sectors organisations have, to make the passage through to a homeless application, if that's appropriate, to be as smooth as possible. But I think the homelessness department have tried to make it so that that isn't necessarily how they want it to be dealt with. They want it to come straight to them, and their so-called housing options are, you know, you could rent privately. Well, for people who are in that very desperate situation, it's not a response that's necessarily going to be suitable to their needs. You know, if you're fleeing violence, you've got perhaps 2 or 3 young kids with you, to try and look through the you know, the local paper to see if there's anywhere they can rent privately isn't, we feel, you know, a good response to people in that situation.
So now with the future in mind, where do you as a voluntary organisations go from here? What future input can you have?
Well, as I say, the main voluntary sector organisations who deal with many of these cases have got together to put a response in. We hope that response will be looked at and what we've said will be taken on board. This is obviously building towards a homelessness strategy for the next 5 years, and part of that strategy must be working with partner organisations to see how best we can serve the residents of Thurrock in providing a service that is to a certain extent seamless, and it deals with the presenting issues, because homelessness as a label just doesn't spring upon people. There are other issues. So if people have lost their job, lost their home, you know, how is that being challenged? Who's helping them with the loss of their job? Who's helping them with fighting perhaps the repossession, you know, before it's got to that stage? So if there's a more intelligent way of helping people, of saying, well, organisations like the Citizen Advice Bureau can help you with your employment problem, they can help you with your debts.
Because homelessness takes many, what you're saying is homelessness takes many forms, you know, it always seems curious is that it does seem there's this hidden world of homelessness, you know, in the borough of people, whether it's, and I guess you're looking about East European people in London, which is only over there, who are clearly homeless. And the question is there a vast tranche of people from Eastern Europe who came here thinking this is going to be great, now they've hit a recession, are they still here and are they homeless? Is there in fact hidden worlds of homelessness in Thurrock? And
that's what the review should really be looking at, you know, so-called sofa surfers, you know, people who, you know, they're homeless, but they're staying with friends, sleeping on their sofa until such times as they can, you know, either their friends say, well, that's enough, we can't support you anymore, or they try and find some other means of getting an accommodation. Or for people from other European countries, it might be, you know, they have to try and get home because of their situation. It's about, a review is about getting some intelligence about how big that cohort of people is, and we don't think that the review really tackles that, because, as again, the voluntary sector organisations do deal with people in all those different situations, but we don't think that's reflected in the tables and the charts that are in the report, and even down to the fact that it doesn't look at the different situation between men and women, because homelessness will affect men and women very differently, and there's a duty there to disaggregate those gender statistics to say, you know, this is how a service is going to look like in the future, because for men perhaps they might be able to jump in their car, drive off, stay with a mate, rent a hotel. For a woman who's perhaps got 2 or 3 children, very different situation, so they will need different support.